I have your attention, please. The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Warning: the material discussed in this show may be sensitive or a trigger for some listeners. Strong language and topics are discussed. We talk with active duty service members and practice OPSEC at all times. You have been warned.
The Bipolar DM, Jason Cottam. His show talks about Dungeons and Dragons, indie writing, and living with a mental illness, in particular bipolar disorder, borderline disorder, and major depression, among other diagnoses. Check us out right here on Saturdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, also on WLFE-DB.com, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. So take a seat, sit back, and get ready for the Bipolar DM.
Welcome to the Bipolar DM Show. I am your host, Jason. This is a show about Dungeons and Dragons, indie writing, and living with a mental illness, in particular bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, and major depression, among other diagnoses. You can watch us live on WLFE-DB.com, also on Strim TV, the Variety Unlimited channel, and twitch.tv/TheBipolarDM, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Central on Saturdays. If you want to get a hold of us, you can reach us at thebipolardm@gmail.com or visit my webpage, www.thebipolardm.com. And we also have our Facebook page. The handle for that is @BipolarDM. So we got a bunch of different ways that you can get a hold of us or reach us. The webpage has lots of information on it. We have resources. We have links to my different live shows that I have going on. And the Facebook page has more up-to-date stuff on a day-to-day basis, like articles, videos, and stuff like that. And so we try and use all the different platforms as we can. If you are interested in supporting what we're doing, you like the shows that we're putting on, and you like what we're doing, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. If you go to patreon.com/TheBipolarDM, you can find out more information about giving at different levels each month, and there's goodies and rewards for each level of support that you do put your support in with us at. And we wanted to thank our number one Patreon, Siobhan, who is our first Patreon supporter, and thank you so much for your believing in us and what we're doing. And we couldn't be doing this without your help, so thank you so much. I want to let you all know that we're also a safe space. If you're not familiar with what Safe Space is, it is a program in which we offer a virtual safe space for anybody who is in crisis or is feeling threatened in some way. Nobody should be bullied. Nobody should feel belittled or any way like that. Now, we're not doctors, we're not psychiatrists or psychologists, we're not here to solve your problems, but we are here to listen. And, without judgment or anything like that, because we've all lived lives that we are otherwise not proud of, and things that we've done in our life. And we understand. And we understand that you, if you're having a rough spot or getting into a bad place, that it'd be a good you need to talk to somebody. And so be sure to check that out. If you go to WLFE-DB.com, there'll be the Safe Space button, and then you click on that, and there's some more resources available there. All right, next week's show, we're going to be talking to Jay Parker. He's a hypnotist or hypnotherapist, so he combines therapy and hypnosis. Oh, hello, Genevieve. So it's one of our sister shows. She's on break right now. But yeah, next week's show we're going to be talking to a hypnotherapist, and if we can get things, he was supposed to be here tonight. Last minute cancellation, so I had to scramble to kind of come up with something else. So we're going to be talking about in today's show about the winter blues, or seasonal affective disorder, and other related illnesses. Now, seasonal affective disorder is more than just the winter blues. It's a type of depression that's related to changes in the season. It tends to begin and ends about the same time every year. In most cases, seasonal affective disorder symptoms appear during late fall or early winter and go away during the sunnier days of spring and summer. So what it is that it's tied to the seasons and the light that's being, that we're able to absorb during the winter months, or the lack of it. And so light has a big, huge part in this. Now, signs and symptoms of seasonal affective disorder may include feeling depressed most of the day, nearly every day, losing interest in activities you once enjoyed, having low energy, having problems with sleeping, experiencing changes in your appetite or weight, feeling sluggish or agitated, having difficulty concentrating, feeling hopeless, worthless, or guilty, having frequent thoughts of death or suicide. And some of the symptoms specific to winter onset seasonal affective disorder are winter depression, is oversleeping, appetite changes, especially in craving for foods high in carbohydrates, weight gain, tiredness, and low energy. Now, each one of these symptoms in of themselves doesn't, really diagnose you as being depressed or clinically depressed. Making the distinction there between the normal ups and downs most people feel versus a clinical depression, which is something that's much more severe. But when you take them all together, all these signs and symptoms of, having changes in your appetite, such as not eating anymore, or overeating, feeling sluggish and agitated, being in a pissy mood, difficulties in concentrating and stuff like that. So all these things all together paint a bigger picture about what's going on with you. And the seasonal effects in bipolar disorder, and some people with bipolar disorder, spring and summer can bring on symptoms of mania or less intense form of mania called hypomania, and fall and winter can be time of depression. That's very true in my own life. I have seasonal affective disorder, and it took a while, a couple years, to kind of pinpoint, the ebb and flow of my depression, the seasons of my depression. And most of it hit me around Christmas time or around December. And I always thought it was just the holiday blues or something like that. But no, it turned out it was actually something a little bit more severe, which was seasonal affective disorder. And so, with the bipolar on top of that, summertime I do tend to get hypomanic a lot more often because I'm got more sunlight and getting all jazzed and juiced up and everything like that. And so it can be pretty rough, especially with the depression. Some of the causes of seasonal affective disorder, even though they, a lot of these specific causes remains unknown, some things they think about are like your biological clock or your circadian rhythm. Reduces level of sunlight in fall and winter may cause a winter onset SAD. This increase in sunlight may disrupt your body's internal clock and lead to feelings of depression. There's also serotonin levels. Having a drop in serotonin that affects mood and may play a role in seasonal affective disorder. Reduced sunlight, again, can stop or cause a drop in serotonin, which may trigger depression. And then there's the melatonin levels. The change in the seasons can disrupt the balance of the body's level of melatonin, which plays a role in sleep patterns and mood. So, you got your biological clock, which is going kind of haywire. You have two chemicals in your brain which are producing correctly. And so you kind of got, this little train wreck going on inside your head. As the winter starts coming on and the depression is on its way. And I'll discuss a little bit more about my particular journey in this in a moment, and also kind of what some of the preventive measures that I've taken. But some of the risk factors with seasonal affective disorder is that it's more diagnosed in women than in men, but that could be also lack of self-reporting in some of these cases, with men and admitting they have a mental illness of any kind. Now, some factors that may increase your risk of seasonal affective disorder include family history, especially those that are a close relation, blood relatives with seasonal affective disorder or other form of depression. You yourself having major depression or bipolar disorder. These symptoms of depression may worsen seasonally if you have one of these conditions. And also living far from the equator. SAD appears to be more common among people who live far north or south of the equator. This may be due to decreased sunlight during the winter and the longer days during the summer months. Some of the complications that go on that are part of this, the complications of life, are social withdrawal. Especially with the depression, you don't want to be around people, and so you withdraw from them and seclude yourself a lot more. And problems with work or school, whatever your main gig is, you're starting to have problems with performance and stuff like that, or attendance, and things are getting really rough there. Substance abuse is real big because self-medicating, because you don't want to feel like this, not all the time. And my longest bout of depression lasted over 3 years. And believe me, going 3 years of constant depression, debilitating, drowning depression, it causes people to start thinking about hurting themselves and having suicidal thoughts or behaviors. And but there is a treatment for it, seasonal affective disorder, and it's actually quite simple. The number one thing that is recommended is the use of light therapy or phototherapy, like a light box, and sitting in front of one of those. Now, with the light box, I have one that the VA gave me, and with the light box, you don't have to sit like directly right in front of it, within a foot of it. You can sit like 3 or 4 feet back from it. And it doesn't have to be right in your face. It can actually be like in a downward angle too. They make stands for these things to, put it over your chair or something like that while you're reading. And so what's important is that you do get about 20 or so minutes, 20 to 30 minutes of sunlight or exposure in the light box for it to be effective. Now, if you do more than that, if you're bipolar, you run the risk of becoming manic or hypomanic. And so it's very, you got to be careful with this, your exposure to sunlight when you're using that. And that's, would be in addition to what you're normally getting, whatever, you're spending outside, unless it's a particularly sunny day and you spend the day outside soaking up natural rays, then you would be able to skip a session with the light box. Now, they don't give you a light box right off the bat. I mean, there is a process that you got to go through before you can get diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder. And the first thing is they got to physically clear you of any other possible illnesses. So there's a physical exam, so that goes to your primary care physician. And in a lot of cases, it's especially with depression, that's about as far as you might need to go as your primary care physician, because they can prescribe antidepressants as well. But your doctor may want to do will want to do a physical exam and then ask in-depth questions about your health. In some cases, depression may be linked to an underlying physical health problem, and so they want to make sure that there isn't anything else going on inside your body, such as cancer or some kind of chemical imbalance or hypertension or some kind of heart disease or problem with that. So you're going to have your physical exam. They're going to do lab tests, or they're going to do a complete blood count or a CBC. Test your thyroid, make sure that's doing fine. Check your vitamins and everything else. And then they're going to recommend you do a referral to psych, and that's where you get your psych eval or psychological evaluation. And that's where they're going to really go into checking, for the signs of depression. The doctor's going to ask you about your symptoms, your thoughts, your feelings, and behavior patterns, and you're going to fill out a questionnaire that can also help with identifying these things. And then you're going to be diagnosed according to the DSM-5, which is the standard for a statistical manual of mental disorders. So it's put out by the American Psychiatric Association, and so the DSM-5 is the go-to standard of diagnosis, and so you're going to be diagnosed according to that criteria. Now, I mentioned that there is treatment, and it's pretty simple, such as light therapy or phototherapy is the first one I meant. The next thing they can do in therapy is medication, and such as an antidepressant, or especially if you're having more severe symptoms. Extended release versions are great too, so they can help level you out throughout the day, so you don't have any spikes or dips in your medication. And your doctor may recommend starting a treatment with an antidepressant before your symptoms typically begin each year too. That's what I did with my doctor. I knew that I was coming close to wintertime last year, and I decided to go ahead and nip this in the bud and ask for to be put back on antidepressants by the doctor in anticipation to the coming winter months. Another thing that is, you got your Lightbox treatment, you got medication, and then there's also psychotherapy or talk therapy, and it's another option to treat SAD. Cognitive behavioral therapy also can help quite a bit. It'll help you identify and change negative thoughts and behaviors that might be making you feel worse. It'll help you learn healthy ways to cope with SAD, especially with reducing avoidance behavior and scheduling activities. It also helps you learn how to manage stress. Cognitive behavioral therapy has been really helpful to me in that, like the first point I mentioned was that it helps you identify and change negative thoughts. What had happened a lot of times, especially with the bipolar and the borderline, is I would just act and react without even thinking about what the hell was coming out of my mouth or what actions I was doing. And a lot of times it was wrong. It was just misconstrued or misunderstood. And so I had to learn how to rethink about the world around me and how I interact with other people instead of jumping to the worst conclusions about them or judging them, their motives without knowing all the facts. I give them the benefit of the doubt, and so by changing and identifying those negative thoughts and changing them to positive ones, it helps prevent you from being, that slide downward, because a lot of times that's where the thoughts begin, is where the negative thought, and then the next thing you got your maladaptive ruminations and stuff and reliving things that you don't want to relive, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And so this helps with identifying it and changing it before it becomes a problem. And learning healthy ways to cope with sad, which avoidance thing behavior. That's like avoiding doing the dishes and doing self-care, or things that are relatively unpleasant. And so we're gonna have to learn how to get around that or get through that. And but also different techniques to cope with anxiety and with the depressive symptoms and everything else. And of course, we got to learn how to manage stress, different ways such as breathing techniques, mindfulness, having a mind-body connection through meditation and stuff like that. Those things are all really important. And there's some things that you can do also in your lifestyle and around your home to kind of help lessen the effects of seasonal affective disorder. One of those is to make your environment more sunnier or brighter, such as opening up the blinds, letting the sunlight in, trimming tree branches that block sunlight, or more extreme case, add skylights to your home. Sit closer to the bright windows while you're at home and office. One thing also I would recommend too, if you're able to, is I would recommend brighter paint colors in your home or office, such as there's nothing wrong with white, but yellows and stuff like that. You want a brighter color too, because that light absorption of the darker shades, really does kind of suck the life out of you. My last apartment had almost like a coffee brown on it paint job, and it also didn't it faced away from the sun, so I didn't get any sunlight into there, and it was just a deep pit of misery. But this new apartment, I get plenty of sunlight. I've got a good exposure, western exposure, and of course I got light-colored walls too. So all those things are great. But make your environment more sunnier and brighter. Get outside, absorbing as much of the natural rays as you can. Take a long walk, eat your lunch at a nearby park, or simply sit on a bench and soak up the rays. Even on a cold and cloudy day, outdoor sun can help, especially if you spend some time outside within 2 hours of getting up in the morning. That's when it's like the most effective. And so part of also getting outside is exercise regularly. Exercise and other types of physical activity help relieve stress and anxiety, both of which can increase seasonal affective disorder symptoms. Being more fit can help make you feel better about yourself too, which can lift your mood. So, and then also the endorphins that are released during exercise and stuff like that, all the good benefits. So you got seasonal affective disorders, but, what is the difference, from that than, say, just major depressive disorder or major depression? Now, depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. Also called major depressive disorder or clinical depression, it affects how you feel, think, and behave, and can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. Now, the difference between seasonal affective disorder and major depression is that seasonal affective disorder comes and goes with the seasons. Being late fall, early winter, for onset, and then for relief of symptoms sometime during the springtime when the sun starts coming back out again. Versus depression, which lasts all the time. When I went through my depressive episode, and the number of years that it lasted, it got worse during winter time, but it was always there. It never went away. And some of the feelings that you get is, you get the feelings of sadness, tearfulness, emptiness, or hopelessness. You can also have a lot of anger too, irritability, frustration, even at the smallest of matters. Loss of interest or pleasure in most all normal activities such as sex, hobbies, or sports. sleep disturbances, which can be either insomnia, which is sleeping too little, or sleeping too much. And you, even no matter how much sleep you get, you always have that sense of tiredness or lack of energy, so that even small tasks take extra effort, like loading the dishwasher or running the vacuum. Reduced appetite and weight loss, or increased cravings for food and weight gain. So either a disturbance in your weight is also a sign of depression. Anxiety, agitation, and restlessness. So not being able to sit still, basically, is what that means. There have been many a times when my depression would strike, but I didn't feel like doing anything, but at the same time I couldn't sit still. And so I have that sense of restlessness. Slow thinking, speaking, or body movements, everything seems to slow down. And you start feeling worthless. You feel guilt. You fixate on past failures or self-blame, blaming yourself for stuff. You're having trouble thinking and concentrating, so it really affects the mind and how the mind works. And then of course there's also the suicidal ideation, frequently thinking of death or suicide attempts or just dying in general. And another thing that's with depression that's also kind of interesting is that sometimes unexplained physical problems can manifest themselves as well. And so it can be quite interesting to see that with major depression you can see body aches or soreness in the joints or certain things, or headaches or other ailments can show up. And really, when it's time to see a doctor is a really important question. If you feel depressed, make an appointment to see your doctor or mental health professional as soon as you can. If you're reluctant to seek treatment, talk to a friend or loved one, or you can contact the crisis health line, the crisis text line, which is down below, or call the crisis line. But if you're feeling, depressed, don't let it get so severe that you're now having to call the crisis line in order to get help. And let's see. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a quick break and go to commercial. And this is the Bipolar DM show. Thank you for watching as we go to break. Welcome back to the Bipolar DM show. I am the host, Jason, and we have been talking about seasonal affective disorder as well as talking about major depression. And we're going to kind of continue on down that thread and look at bipolar depression and bipolar type 1 and 2 in particular. And with bipolar depression is a lot more difficult to treat. I mean, there's new medications out now that help with it, but bipolar depression is pretty rough in that it's a lot of extreme lows. It's very persistent, very long. I mean, like I said, mine lasted 3 years. Bipolar disorder was formerly called manic depression, or meaning up and down. It is a mental health condition that causes extreme mood swings that include emotional highs, which is mania or hypomania, and lows, which is depression. Now, when you become depressed, you may feel sad or hopeless or lose interest or pleasure in most activities. When your mood shifts to mania or hypomania, which is a less extreme form of mania, you may feel euphoric, full of energy, or unusually irritable. These mood shifts can affect sleep, energy, activity, judgment, behavior, and the ability to think clearly. And that's one reason why we make so many stupid mistakes with our life when we're manic, is because it's very difficult to think straight, especially when you think you're at the top of the world. I don't get manic. Manic is like being on, taking 10 hits of meth and then downing a case of Red Bull, and that's like, being manic. I get hypomanic, which means it's a lower form or lesser form of mania where I don't have those extreme highs that can bring on psychosis or a total break from reality. And so, I have the lows. I get really low. Bipolar, it's a butt kicker. It really is, and it's a lifelong condition. Now, some scientists think that like bipolar and borderline get better as you age. I don't think it's necessarily true as much as you just learn how to live with it and to manage your symptoms. And some people don't. And that's where you have what bipolar people think of bipolar, what it's not, which is the really extreme highs and then the depressive lows, which is true, but also that we're sociopaths or we're monsters or we're just insane or we're one push away from getting a loaded weapon and going to town on and shooting up a town. That's not what it is for us when we have this disease. Now, bipolar 1 means you had at least one manic episode that can be either preceded or followed by a hypomanic or major depressive episode. So basically you have, within a year, a high and a low, so because it's real, and the high can be really high, like a mania, which triggers a break from reality or psychosis. I mean, I had an example of this is my friend Rose had a psychotic break, and she thought that she was on a mission to find Jesus, and she ended up at somebody's house down in Arkansas when the cops picked her up, and she was knocking on the door asking if Jesus was there. Ironic thing was, a week before, a homeless man who called himself Jesus was knocking on that same door. And it was kind of an interesting thing, but both those times they have a total break in reality, of what they think of themselves, whether it's grandiose or the opposite. Now, bipolar disorder type 2 is you have one of the major is the opposite. While they measure the highs on bipolar 1, they're measuring the lows on bipolar 2, where you've had at least one major depressive episode and at least one hypomanic episode. So you have both, because if you don't have both of those, then it could be something else, like a cyclothymic disorder or bipolar type 3. Now, the one thing to note about bipolar 2 is not a milder form of bipolar 1, but a separate diagnosis. While the manic episodes of bipolar 1 disorder can be severe and dangerous, individuals with bipolar 2 disorder can be depressed for longer periods, which can cause significant impairment. And the onset of this typically is during the teen years and early 20s. Now, I was 22 when I was diagnosed, right in the sweet spot. Some of you might not be quite getting what the mania is when I talk about mania and the highs and stuff like that, and and the break from reality and stuff. But some of the symptoms of mania are they're abnormally upbeat. I mean, like cheer squad, super peppy, jumpy or wired, or you'd think that they were on meth, with how squirrely they are. Increase in activity, energy, or agitation. So if they have they're on a cleaning binge, or they're really agitated and really bitter or and snippy, that's a symptom of mania. An exaggerated sense of well-being or self-confidence, euphoria. So, I mean, they really think they're on cloud nine, that no matter what the finances and the bank says, everything's going to be all right, and they have a decrease the need in sleep, and that's where you get insomnia coming in, where I'll go 2 or 3 days without sleep sometimes. Unusually talkativeness. I mean, they really are a chatterbox, and so that's a sign too of a lot of energy. Racing thoughts, where they can't just quiet their mind, they can't concentrate on any one thing, or they're distracted with distractibility. And poor decision making, for example, going on buying sprees, taking sexual risks, or making foolish investments. So with the mania, the mania is really destructive, but it's the depression that could kill you. Not literally, but through suicide and passive suicide. A lot of people take their own lives during a depressive state, not while they're manic. And so that's what we're looking at with bipolar and bipolar 2. Last thing I want to look at is actually a borderline personality disorder, and this is a little bit different than what we're looking at with the seasonal affective disorder or major depression and the bipolar, which are really changes in the chemical makeup of your brain. This is more behavioral. And so borderline personality disorder is a mental health disorder that impacts the way you think and feel about yourself and others, causing problems functioning in everyday life. This includes self-image issues, difficulty managing emotions and behaviors, and a pattern of unstable relationships. Big deal with having borderline, and thinking about the way people think about you, or being obsessed or worried about how you're perceived. It was a big thing that I had to deal with and get through. Probably one of the most freeing things in my life was learning not to give a fuck about what anybody else thought about me. And when I finally came to that realization that I really didn't care what people thought about me, it was very freeing. Now, your problems with your self-image issues, most of the time it's negative. For me, I felt like I was unlovable, that nobody could truly love me or even like me as a person if they really knew what I was like. I felt like a fake, a fraud, that I'm putting on a show that I'm really not who I pretend to, who I'm trying to present myself to be. And so I have a lot of self-image problems, and I have difficulty managing my emotions and my behaviors. I mean, my emotions are just, I'll be sitting on the couch and then all of a sudden a commercial will come on and then I go into a burst of tears. Or I'll just be cutting up, I'll be doing dishes or something like that and all of a sudden start crying for no reason. Or having inappropriate anger, mood swings, pushing and pulling, people towards you and away from you. Impulsiveness, especially with things that are like quick gratification, such as shopping. I have huge problems with money and trying to maintain that because I'm on a fixed income with being a disabled vet. It's hard to live on a paycheck that only pays you once a month and to make it last a whole month. But I'm working on it. And so there's shopping, there's sexual, multiple partners, risky sex, unprotected sex. Hypersexuality and bipolar are really tied to each other a lot, especially during manic and hypomanic episodes. Now, borderline personality disorder usually begins in early adulthood, and the condition seems to be worse in young adults and may gradually get better with age. And again, I disagree. I think that we just learn to manage a little bit better. Or you don't. And you never change, So, I mean, one person that I was seeing for a bit commented that she couldn't see any traits of borderline personality disorder. And I said, well, that's really good because I worked really hard to stamp them out, and not be that person. And some of the signs and symptoms of borderline is, and how it affects how you feel about yourself and how you relate to others. So one of them is an intense fear of abandonment, even going to extreme measures to avoid real or imagined separation or rejection. You're always on the relationship's on the out, or it's about to be over. He's going to leave me, or she's going to leave me. Always being afraid and clingy, afraid that you're going to be left and be abandoned. That was one of my biggest things, was abandonment issues, and it made me very clingy. A pattern of unstable, intense relationships, such as idealizing someone one moment and then suddenly believing the person doesn't care enough or is cruel. I did put women up on a pedestal a lot of times, unfairly, and and I had some very intense relationships too, and they weren't very long lasting. They're short and usually didn't end well. Rapid changes in identity and self-image that include shifting goals and values and seeing yourself as bad or as if you don't exist at all. One of the weirdest things is having that sense of not being real. I feel it a lot. It's kind of surreal. I'm not feeling real at all, but it's kind of hard to describe what it's like, but it's not quite numbness. It's just kind of like a really weird out-of-body experience that you feel like you're just not really there at all. And so you have rapid changes in self-identity, thinking about yourself, especially if you're going from highs to lows, where you're going from thinking, hey, I'm the next greatest thing to happen, to I am the worst person on the planet. Dictators and General Mao and the rest of them are better people than I am. You got those extremes go on, sometimes within a day, sometimes within several hours. Periods of stress-related paranoia and loss of contact with reality lasting from a few minutes to a few hours. And that's a total psychotic break. The paranoia, I have experienced that a lot. Usually not from any single threat. I didn't believe the government was after me, or that there are elements out there that were nefarious towards me. It was just more. Excuse me. It was more hypervigilance and worrying that, that this day that I go out there, whether it's this day or whatever, that is going to be the last time I step out my front door. Being on, always being on swivel 360, just always being aware of my surroundings and stuff like that. The hypervigilance. And I mean, I didn't get so bad as I thought people were out to get me, but I had a healthy level of paranoia. And then, but I've never had a break for reality like you would with mania. There's impulsive or risky behavior such as gambling, reckless driving, unsafe sex, spending sprees, binge eating, or drug abuse, or sabotaging successes by suddenly quitting a good job or ending a positive relationship. Suicidal threats or behaviors or self-injury, often in response to fear of separation or rejection. That's usually you think somebody's going to leave you, so you hurt yourself to bring them closer to you, or threats of suicide. And whenever somebody says, the old adage, suicide, when people talk about suicide, it's just a cry for help. Well, yeah, it is a cry for help. It's something they're needing help right now. And you don't want to wait until after the funeral to realize that you could have done something about it. So suicidal threats and behaviors of self-injury, like cutting and stuff like that, burning, need to be taken very seriously. And wide mood swings lasting from a few hours to a few days, which can include intense happiness, irritability, shame, or anxiety, all wrapped up one right after another like a roller coaster. Ongoing feelings of emptiness, inappropriate, intense anger, such as frequently losing your temper, being sarcastic or bitter, or having physical fights. If you're aware that you're having any of these signs or symptoms above, you need to talk to your doctor. Most especially if you're fantasizing or have mental images about hurting yourself or having suicidal thoughts. You need to get help right away. First, to medically be cleared, and then psychologically as well. I've been running the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Down at the bottom is some of the resources, and the Veterans Crisis Line and the Crisis Text Line. Let me bring those back up again. Okay, sorry, I was just reading the comments. I hadn't been keeping up on them. So, there we go. The Suicide Prevention Hotline now is 988. It's the 911, the equivalent of 911. Now it's 988. And the Suicide Prevention, or the Suicide Prevention Hotline is still open. And that's available 24 hours a day. And if you're a veteran, you would press 1 to get to somebody who's specially trained to be able to talk with you. So, looking at borderline personality disorder, not a lot is known about the causes of personality disorders. They're not really fully understood. Some people think it's genetics. Others think it's brain abnormalities. Some research has shown changes in certain areas of the brain involved in emotional regulation, impulsivity, and aggression. And that's all in the same little section of the brain. In addition, certain brain chemicals that help regulate mood, such as serotonin, may not function properly. So you have, brain abnormalities, and you have a chance of genetics too. Hereditary disposition. but I didn't have those markers. My mom might have suffered from depression, but as far as any other mental illness, it really wasn't known to exist in my family. Some people also attribute a stressful childhood to later developing borderline personality disorder. Many people with the disorder report being sexually or physically abused or neglected during childhood. Some people have lost or were separated from a parent or close caregiver when they were young, or had parents or caregivers with substance misuse or other mental health issues. Others have been exposed to hostile conflict and unstable family relationships. So, having a rough childhood, especially one where you're on your own, latchkey kid, stuff like that, like I was, and being very much alone and isolated from society through bullying and stuff like that, I've lived a very lonely life. Now, there are some complications that happen with borderline in a person's life, and it can negatively affect intimate relationships, jobs, school, social activities, self-image. Those things can be repeated job changes or losses. It's hard for us to keep a job when we have borderline personality, when we have problems with our emotions. Especially if we're going through a depressive mood, or even going through a manic or hypomanic episode. But it's hard to keep a job for very long. Not completing education or some other trade school. So just say you went to trade school but never finished, or you dropped out of college. That's a significant complication that results from borderline. Multiple legal issues such as jail time, from DUIs or speeding or assault, those kind of things. Conflict-filled relationships, marital stress, or divorce. Now, that's one thing that I didn't have, is I didn't have fighting in my marriage. Even when it was towards the end, we never fought. We never yelled at each other. I never raised a hand to her. She never did that to me. But we did. But that's not saying our relationship wasn't fucked up. It's just that we just didn't fight. Self-injury such as cutting or burning, and frequent hospitalizations. That's cutting and burning. They serve a purpose a lot of times with people. I know from my own experience with cutting that it helped me feel something. Feeling pain validated the internal pain that I was feeling inside, and so the cutting, when I would cut on my body, my hands or my abdomen or something like that, the pain validated what I was feeling, because I couldn't understand why should I be feeling these feelings of self-loathing and pain and depression and all that when I got, what I want going on in my life. And so cutting helped relieve that. And involvement in abusive relationships can also be a complication that results from borderline. When you're unstable yourself, it's hard to be with stable people. Also you can run the risk of unplanned pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections, if you're doing the risky sexual behavior. Motor vehicle accidents, physical fights due to impulsivity and risky behaviors. Attempted or completed suicides, and that is also a complication with mental illness. And I am a suicide survivor. I had made an attempt several years ago. In my case, I believe it was because of a new medication I was on. It was a mood stabilizer, and it wasn't until after my suicide attempt that I learned that it was a possible side effect of the medication was suicide ideation or attempts. And but I survived, so thank God, and I didn't seem to do any major or permanent damage to myself. Other disorders that can be comorbid with this one or co-occurring is depression, of course, alcohol or substance misuse. That's a big one right there. A lot of alcoholics and those that are drug addicts also have, a lot of times do have some kind of psychiatric problem. There's anxiety disorders, eating disorders, bipolar disorder, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and other personality disorders. So there's a lot of things that are tied to this, to borderline personality disorder. Now, treatments, diagnosis, of course, like how I said before, you go to the doctor, first to your primary care, and then they physically clear you, and then you go to referral to psych, and then psych will get you evaled. And they do a complete history on you. And borderline personality disorder is mainly treated by using psychotherapy, but medications may be added. The funny thing about with borderline is that it doesn't really react a lot to medication because it's not an imbalance like bipolar is. And so it's more of behavioral, and that's why psychotherapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy have been very effective, is because it's affecting behavior. And psychotherapy can help you with attain certain goals, such as focusing on your current ability to function, where you're at right now. Learn to manage emotions that feel uncomfortable. Reduce your impulsiveness by helping you observe feelings rather than acting on them. That's a big one right there, is to step outside of yourself and realize, that the feelings that you're feeling are only temporary. They will pass. You don't have to act on them. And, it's easier said than done. Work on improving relationships by being aware of your feelings and those of others, and learn about borderline personality disorder. Dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, includes group and individual therapy designed specifically to treat borderline personality disorder. DBT uses a skill-based approach to teach you how to manage your emotions, tolerate the stress, and improve relationships. And then there's the schema-focused therapy. There's a couple several different therapy medications. So, sad to say, though, there is times that you may have to be in the hospital. And when those times happen, believe me, I'm one of the last people to say, let's go to the hospital. But, when you need to be there, you need to be there. And, it's just, there's a reason why that we have the hospitals, and that's so we can be safe, because, that's the main reason why you go there, is because you don't feel safe within yourself even. And it's very humbling to go to the hospital and have everything that you own taken off of you, being given a pair of pajamas, and then sleep in a room with a thin blanket on a bed that's weighed down by 300 pounds of sand, so it can't be lifted by a patient. It is very humbling. But that's a story for another day. I want to thank all of you for tuning in to the Bipolar DM show. I am your host, Jason. If you want to get a hold of me, you can reach me by email at thebipolardm@gmail.com, or visit my webpage, www.thebipolardm.com. Also, go to WLFE-DB.com, my radio station that I'm part of. You can check them out. They got other shows there as well. And we're on Strim TV under the Variety Unlimited channel, and on twitch.tv/thebipolardm. All right, well, thank you so much for tuning in. And once again, remember, everybody, take your meds.
Thank you for listening to the Bipolar DM. They love sharing thoughts and ideas. See you next week, 7 p.m. Saturdays on WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows, and that makes for great talk radio. WLFE Digital Broadcast Network is on TV. You can watch all of our shows on WLFE-DB.com. Check out our channels: Paranormal View for all of your paranormal type shows, LGBTQ Friends for all of our LGBTQ shows, Variety Unlimited for all other shows. It runs 24/7 right on WLFE-DB.com. You'll even catch the lives, all in one place. Never miss an episode, past or future. WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows.